Hi, my name is Nerdico, also known as Furby, and welcome to a segment that I call Decks of Christmas Path. This is a video series where I'm going to talk about old decks that I've built. So what am I going to do? 1. Who was the commander and what does it do? 2. Some personal insight about where I was as a player when I was building this. 3. Why did I build a deck? What was the motivation or the inspiration for making the deck? 4. What was the main strategy of the deck? What was I trying to do? What was the ideology? What was my win con? 5. Some of the pros and cons of the deck. 6. Why did I take the deck apart? And finally, 7. Would I would I consider rebuilding this deck? Why or why not? And what are some things that I would add to make the deck better? So, today I'm going to talk about my second deck that I ever fully built, Skullbrair, the Walking Grave. He is a 1/1 that with haste that costs 1 green and 1 black with the ability that says whenever Skullbrair deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Counters remain on Skullbrair as it moves to any zone other than a player's hand or library. That's important to know. Part 2, or segment 2. So I was still learning the ropes about what EDH was, like what the point of the game format is. Um, I actually attempted to build a few other decks in between Rift and Skullbriar, but I never actually finished them. Um, if I remember right, one of the ones that I built was Newmont. But halfway through building that, I was like, I hate land destruction, so nope. Um, Once again, like Rift, I was working with a very limited card pool due to my collection being a lot smaller than my current collection. 3. So the motivation for it, the motivation for building the deck is that I actually bought the first Bug EDH Precon. Originally, I was thinking about making Mimeoplasm, but I still felt super shaky about building a 3-color deck. But I knew that I wanted to do something with green because I've always been a green player, right? Um, but I wasn't a fan of white, I wasn't a fan of blue, and I wasn't a fan of red. But I did like black, so I figured Golgari was the best option. Plus, I'm a big fan of the +1/+1 counters. I like the idea of a creature that was able to attack right away, um, got bigger, even if it died, it was stayed big and stuff. It really scratched an itch for me as a Timmy player. Um, 4. Main strategy. So the main strategy was Voltron. This was my first attempt at Voltron. My main strategy was to make my commander as big as possible and go wide. I had spells, enchantments, etc. to buff my commander, and I was trying to make it as big as possible while trying to give it evasion and trample so I can get through with my commander and kill somebody. I took some of the pieces from Rift. I took stuff like Doubling Season, Rancor, Primal Rage, and I already owned a bunch of tutors like Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Tutor, and I put those in there so that I could like search for my stuff faster. Mm, Pros and cons. So, pros, from a player standpoint, I think I started to figure out what made a good and a bad commander card. Um, so I learned lessons. That's a pro. The deck was pretty fast. I had a good amount of ramp, good amount of tutors, a good amount of removals due to being in Golgari. When the deck worked, it worked. But I felt like a lot of times it didn't. I had trouble getting through, so it made it really hard, which leads me to the cons. I was having issues getting through, or I was getting the commander bounced back to my hand, or during that time, tucking was a thing. So like having like my commander tucked into my library with spell crumble really sucked. I also didn't have enough ways to protect my commander in general. Um, that's an issue that I've struggled a lot with Voltron, and I think I was too hyper focused on just making Skullbriar big. He's got to be a big boy. Um, 6. Why did I take it apart? Easy. I felt like it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. I liked what I learned from the deck. It just felt like it didn't function the way I wanted, so I was just kind of like, yeah. Another reason was because I started exploring more options for Commander, and I actually used a lot of the bones of this Commander to build my next Commander. But I'll get to that then. Um, Part 7. Would I build it again? I think I would, because I think I've gotten better at deck building, and I've actually gotten better at Voltron. I currently have a Boros Voltron deck that's equipment heavy that does really well, so I feel like I could take those lessons that I've learned from that and import it back to Skullbriar. Plus, there's a lot more options now for evasion. Things like Rose Passage makes it easier to swing out, but I also would add things like Orin Frostfang for the draw. Maybe more equipments like the Shadow Spear for the trample and lifelink, so that I have the sustainability. So yeah, that was my second deck. I think that it was a good learning lesson, and it made me realize the things that I do like and don't like in regards to the format. So I really appreciate the lessons that I learned from it, and it also, like I mentioned, it led me to building one of my longest lasting decks, which is Sarva, Queen of the Golgari. I had that for like 10 plus years because I loved it so much, but I would have never figured that out if it wasn't for Skullbriar. Um, so tell me what you think. Did you like the video? What would you change? I'm really open to criticism at this point because I'm trying to figure out, is this like a good breakdown of how I'm doing stuff? So yeah,